What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bringing you incredible guests from all over the world. So sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is a global business strategist, speaker, champion of small and medium-sized businesses, and also a philanthropist, if I can say the word. Please welcome Kerry Ann Powell. Kerry Ann, welcome to the show. I am so excited for this conversation. And let's get into it.
Deanna, thanks for having me. I am completely stoked, really.
Yes. Well, we've already talked quite a bit before we started recording. You've done quite a lot of big things in your life. And so I want to start off by highlighting and talking about you raising $120 million to build the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. That is insane.
Yeah, it really continues to be the most amazing thing that I have done in my career and one of the most fulfilling things in my life, for real.
Yeah. I can believe it. So as someone, like I mentioned, have done some fundraising, not on that level, but I'm very involved against human trafficking. And I know like what it takes to do that, to get involved in that. Like, I mean, I don't even know, how did you manage to raise $120 million?
Yeah, well, lots of begging, but there's strategy around it.
Yeah.
I cut my teeth in fundraising right after I graduated from college. So I was a pre-med and I was going to be going to become a neuroscientist. That was the plan. Wow. But then when it was time to graduate, I realized I actually didn't want to do that. Of course, my parents were kind of like, so what you going to do? Because, we've paid a lot of money for your education. Yes. So, of course, I was, a little, flailing a bit, the year after graduation. And so they insisted that I get a job so that I could be able to pay for my car payment. And so one of my good friends, she had gotten a job working for the United Way in our college town. And she said, Kerry Ann, they're looking for someone to come in and do like a 6-month time where they're, you're managing sort of the speakers and tours aspect of the organization. Because, they do campaigns, if you don't think about the United Way. So I said, okay, yeah, that's great. That's 6 months, full-time salary. My parents will be happy. It'll give me some time to think about what the next step is, right?
Yeah.
So I went in there and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these professional business people doing all this amazing thing, raising money for all of these causes in our community that are really, really vital. And so once I did that, I said, oh, this is what I want to do. Now, of course, I'm wet around the ears, just graduated from college. I walked into the VP of development and I said, I want to be a division director. So I need you to hire me. I'm going to be the best one ever.
I love it.
You don't know what you don't know when you're 21, right? Yeah. So she looked at me though, and she's like, okay, thank you for letting me know. So the time was up and I went along my little way, did a little part-time temp work. And then she called me 2 months later and said, come in for the interview. We've got a position open for you. She brought me in and I was the youngest division director they had ever hired as a fundraiser. And at that time, I didn't know how many doors it was going to open for me.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was working with, CEOs of companies in our local community, going around and having conversations with other CEOs about, real large gifts, and also how to engage their individual employees and how to give charitably. And I was able to see how there's a tool, a way of being that you need to do in order to get those kinds of large asks. And when you're young, you don't have any shame. So, if I was asking someone, well, what we really need from you is 500,000, or what we really need from you is, whatever, you don't really think it's a big deal. So I was modeling what I was seeing. And that is where I cut my list. I did that for about 3 years. Went on to law school from there, moved to Washington, and that's where I started my lobbying degree in public interest law. Wow. So when the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial was looking for a fundraiser, all they were looking for was someone to do primarily corporate fundraising, which I knew how to do, right? Sure. So I put my hat in the ring. First of all, I didn't actually know at that time that they were building a memorial. So it was a good friend of mine said, and she's like, do you know they're building a memorial for Martin Luther King? I said, I had no idea. I mean, on the National Mall. I mean, there's several around the country, but on the National Mall, there's only like our presidents and our memorials to our veterans. So I'm like, for real? So anyway, I was like, okay, let's do this. So I researched it. I put my hat in the ring. They interviewed me. I came on board as the fundraiser focused on corporate fundraising.
Okay.
And I just started putting my, skills into play. And then it just so happened a year later, the head of fundraising for the memorial, she moved on to another opportunity. They asked me to step in. So when I was there, when I first started, probably were at about 30 million. Yeah. Okay. So when I first got there, and then from there on, I was able to raise over 120 from that point. And I'm telling you, some of the things that I use in my business right now in terms of how to develop a strong strategy, how to really execute a strong strategy, how to really bring your team together to be able to rally around it. These are things that I learned during that process, because a lot of times people thought, oh, we had this massive team because, obviously it was a big project. Yeah. But the reality was, it was a small team, and we just were like, we felt like we were like scrappy, we're like, we're not okie doke here, but we were a small team, small relatively, right, given the large magnitude of the project. Sure. But I tell you, I really loved it. It was one of the most fulfilling things of my life, and definitely one of the key moments in my career, for sure.
Sure. I mean, that's a huge like accolades for yourself. Like, I mean, to put on your resume. I mean, I don't care where you are in life, like that's a big deal. And so how long did it take you to raise all those funds? And then, when you were done, was that just the time for you to move on? Did they reach their goal, or,
Yeah. So like? Good question. So I'm going to say it was kind of funny when I first got there. So we were at 30 when I first got there, and they were like, oh, well, we think maybe it might be another 3 years, not. Yeah. I think it was probably 6-7 years that it took for us to do that. Also, you might remember, you wouldn't know, but during that time we had a lot of stops and slowdowns, because we had Hurricane Katrina. Oh yeah, that happened during that time. So we had to really we didn't pause our fundraising, but all of philanthropic dollars were going towards the Katrina situation. Then during that time, we had the huge bank crisis on Wall Street. Yep. So, so I would say, let's say we were, I was averaging when I finally got things moving, I was averaging a good 20 million a year. And then when the crisis came, really honestly, I remember that year, I might've brought in 100,000 if. So you can imagine, like, the scary feelings. And that's the thing too. It's like, that's life, right? You have to just recognize that, people see the grand finish and they're like, oh my gosh, it must have been so great to just, it goes up and down, and you have to stay your course. It really, really have to stay the course. So, so at the end, what we did was we had raised enough money. So there was the building of the memorial, 120. Right. This was an additional, I think, 6 million, 7 million for the dedication events. Okay. Yeah. And, I'll tell you stories about that. Oof, like the beginning of the year of our dedication, I had not even finished raising the 120. And then, of course, we had to go through and do some RFPs to see how much dedication was going to cost. And we're like, oh, here's a number, 6 million. And I'm like, so you want us to, okay, all right, finish this and then get, okay. But one of the things so what we did was a lot of our donors, not a lot, to be honest, but some of our donors did pledge some of their dollars. So they were like, okay, we're going to give you $1 million, but we're going to do 250 each year. So the folks in the early part that pledged were fine. Okay. Mm-hmm. But towards the end, there needed to be some amount of, once the dedication was over, the memorial was built, everybody was going. Yeah. There was a couple of years where towards the end where people had pledged later on. So there needed to be a couple of infrastructure staff to be able to collect on those pledges. Sure. And also, the plan was to transition from a philanthropic funding organization to an education organization. So right now the organization still exists. So they asked me to stay on for about 2 years to help, our President Harry Johnson really launch what could be a strong educational program around Dr. King and his philosophies and his values and principles. So once that was complete, then I was like, well, I've done my work here. Yeah. What next? Yeah. So was that full time for you during that whole time? That's full time. Full time, all time, full time. And it was interesting because I always thought I was going to go back to the law, but over that period of time, I just never did go back to the law. Because I was like, oh, it's going to be 3 years. I'll take a break, go back.
Yeah.
It didn't really go back, but that was fine because it was, I had other things I wanted to do. I wanted to start the business. I wanted to, do different things. So, but yeah, so that's how it ended, really.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm sure during that time when you're working with all these large donors, like the different kinds of people that you met throughout that journey had to be
Oh, for
incredible.
sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, the relationships that I have, I mean, I've got like real friendships with people
Yeah.
who I met because I begged them for money.
And that's a hard ask. You know what I mean? Especially the amounts that you're asking for.
Yeah.
I mean, I would not be. I'm very weird about money. Like I'm very weird about it. Like I feel like I don't want to ask anybody for anything ever, and that's one of my downfalls. And so when I did my charity event, it's like it's not for me, so it's easier for me to
It's
ask.
easier.
Do you feel the same way?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I think yes. I did feel okay. I didn't have an issue with money because literally I was early days.
Yeah.
So when I started asking for money early, so I just didn't have a thing about it.
Sure.
However, I will say when I started my business, so I started my business sort of on the side and it was sort of happenstance. I was doing some of my own work, my own internal work. I was also, and then other, professional women in DC were like, hey, come and speak at this or come and do this. And then I started doing some retreats. But then when I went full time into the business as consulting, I started really consulting primarily with other NGOs. So that was easy because, it's my, I could do it with my eyes closed.
Right. Yeah.
But then when I started really, it just so happened that a lot of, because of my network, a lot of business owners, people that I knew were like, hey, I got a friend, she's a business, she's had it for about 10 years, are still not scaling, can you just have a conversation with them? And then, to kind of have the convo. And what I have come to realize that when in my first stages of the business, where I was like, do I feel comfortable asking someone for money?
Yeah.
It was a little weirdish, but I knew, like at that time, I was so confident in the fact that I knew I could help them that I was like, yeah, that's how much it costs. But I'm telling you, like, you're going to get this. It was
Sure.
less about me asking for money and more about, look, you have a problem. I can show you how to fix it. Let's just do this, And that was kind of the posture. But I do know that people do have an issue around asking for money. And I often say, it really comes down to, do you really believe in your product or in your service? Do you believe in it? And do you love the person? And love is like this word. Well, I only love the people that I love. Love is an energy space,
Yes.
right? There's different types of love. If you love the person who's sitting in front of you saying, hey, I got this need and your product might be able to fix it, then
Sure.
you get past your own issues and just start loving well and saying, here's how I can help.
Yeah.
And this is how much it costs.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. That's awesome. So let's talk about your business. What's the name of it?
Well, it's Trafalgar Strategies, and we do business strategy consulting with small and medium-sized companies. And, I absolutely love it because I work primarily with, small and medium-sized companies. So, I'm working primarily with the founder.
Yeah.
And maybe they may have a couple of folks on their leadership team. But I don't necessarily work with the team itself, although there are other things that we can do with them. But it's really exciting to kind of see folks journey with them and really help them create, a business that actually thrives, that doesn't take up, 48 hours of their 24-hour day and allows them to actually live their lives. Because I've found that there's so much chaos in small business and people think that it's okay to like live in that kind of chaos. I'm like, no, that's not what business is. I mean, there's a little bit of, challenges at face. That's why entrepreneurs, we love that stuff, right? It's like we want a little bit of a challenge, but not chaos, not chaos.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we really work and help our founders with is really sort out the business in a way that allows for them to grow, to scale, for them to increase their revenue, for them to be able to have strong teams, and then for them to be able to walk away from the business without feeling like it's going to implode.
Sure.
So that's what, and I think too, you talked about, the money part, I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I don't really ever feel rejected when I'm speaking to people, because when we were fundraising, I was, towards the end, when we were transitioning towards the education foundation after fundraising, we were downsizing the office space. We didn't need as many people, So, we were just trying to go through some of the files, decided we're going to put those files in storage, blah, blah, blah. And I was going through some of the files of, some of the companies that we found, like major household name companies. And I would see like literally like 20 letters over the years saying, addressed to me, saying, thank you for, coming down and having a meeting with us about this. Sorry, we're not going to be able to fund the project at this time. I'm like 20 rejection letters. And then there's that one letter that said, okay, here's 3 million. I mean, it's just the way life is. So, you get the first no, you get the second no, you get the third no. And that's really one of the big things that I hope your audience takes away from this whole conversation is really of a truth. There really isn't ever a final no, because at what point, you could decide that you're almost like, oh, well, 12, in sales, like, oh, 12 touch points, if the 12 touch points, they don't respond, then that's it. There's never a final. You never stop asking, because the reality is they may not need your service, your product now, but at some point, if you give value, if you're there, if you're top of mind, eventually they'll be like, I need you. 20 letters of rejection. And then
I've been in sales, so I feel like you just got to keep asking. You never, in a different approach, like, oh, because that it's all about timing too, right?
Right.
You can't take those no's personally. It's the rejection is part of rejection is really part of anything, right? Like you got to deal with it, take the punches, and move on. And like it's hopefully you're growing and learning how to finesse your approach so that those no's come less and less, and that's really kind of the name of the game.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And I think sometimes too, and I get it. We all have our story, right? It's I do a lot of work with strategy, and I believe strategy is the name of the game. If you can have a strong strategy, you have a strong execution plan, you can really make it happen. At the same time, I'm very aware that 80% of it is really mindset. So if you really have a story around rejection, if you have a story that keeps you from standing in the space around asking and offering whatever it is that your product or service is, then that's going to impact the way that you show up as an owner, as a founder. And it's going to show up the way that even if you have a good, strong sales team, it does show up still. Your story infiltrates, the way that the ethos of the organization. So it's really important, I think, for us to kind of recognize where we have a story that's false. It's always false, right? Because it's all abundance. Everything's abundance. So if you have a story that's false and you're, then like work through it, do the work, whatever you need to do to do it, and like eliminate it so that you can really walk into the greatness.
Yeah. I have a question in regards to what you do in the different businesses that you work with. What is like one key area that maybe they all have in common where they're having a hard time with their strategy that you help them with? Because it's a new day and age, right? Like technology is a big part of everything. And I feel like small, medium-sized businesses might have more of that mom and pop mentality. That's hard for them to get over that hump so that they can jump in today's world.
I think you're right, Deanna. I think there's a part of it is, so there's one, there are four main things that the four primary things that people come to me with what I would call a felt need. Obviously I often call it the symptoms of chaos versus the actual chaos, because the actual chaos is deep down and there's other issues that we need to deal with. But the real chaos, symptoms of chaos that I see most people come to me is when they finally begin to ask for help. And these are seasoned business owners, but they're small and medium sized. One is they really honestly are not growing. Now, I believe there's a difference between growth and scale, and you know the deal, right? Yeah. So I believe that a business is just like nature. If it's not growing, it's dying. So it needs to be growing. Now, the question is, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I want to scale this, the same way that, Facebook scale. Yeah, no, you don't have to scale the way you want to scale, at the rate you want to scale. But if you're not scaling, it's a problem. That means that you're stagnating, which means you're going to go down. Okay. So that's one. Two, they're having some sort of cash issue. Yeah. Right? Revenues are not strong, or the cash flow is going out. There's a cash problem which is very different than just the scaling.
Yeah.
There's a revenue problem, and people always say, "Oh, I need more sales." Yeah, no, you might not. It might be another issue that's causing this cash problem in the business.
Yeah.
But the thing is, people like, "Oh, how long have you had this cash problem?" "Oh, it's been going on since I've had the business." Do you know 80%? It's the number one reason why businesses fail is because of a cash problem.
Yeah.
So it's not like a thing that you're supposed to just sit around with for a bit. You need to like address it. So that's the second thing. The third thing is they're having a problem with the team. Either they can't delegate well to the team. The team is not, showing up at a rock star level. Something is wrong with the team. Oftentimes I find that it's because they built the team early days, kind of with, oh, cousin Susie knows social media, and, my best friend Michael's, friend over there knows how to do sales, and you kind of did a hodgepodge. You never really looked at the business and kind of said, okay, what does our business need?
Sure.
What does, what type of person, what kind of skills does it really need for each of these roles? And do you know what those roles mean? And can you hire, and, whatever. And then the fourth thing is the feeling of, yeah, the business is great, but I can never leave it. Like I can't walk away without feeling like it's going to implode. And sometimes they can actually walk away. It's just a feeling, but sometimes no, they really, really can't, Deanna. They really can't. So those are four main common problems that I have noticed people come to me with.
Yeah.
And now you ask the question, are there some fundamental reasons around it? Some of those things could be anything. And I usually walk people through a systematic methodology that I work them through to help them identify, or to help us identify really what is the problem. And that goes back to, because remember, it's small and medium-sized businesses. So the owners and founders are still in the business, right? Mm-hmm. And so I first really ask the founders, what is their life purpose and plan? What is the plan that you have for your life? Yeah. Because if you're still at that stage where you're building a business, then if you don't know what your life plan is, like how do you really want to be existing in the world, then the business vision could be at odds with it. So I think it's really first time to sort of, and some people are like, oh, it's just such a mushy thing to do. That's not business like. I'm like, yeah, okay, well,
But it goes hand in hand, like, it has to be synergetic, right?
It has to be synergetic. And if there is not a connection between the business vision and the owner's life plan, what changes? Not the life plan, the business vision. You tweak that. Now, the business vision can be tweaked like, it may only need like a 1 millimeter shift, sure, right? But so people are like, I've had my business for 10 years. I can't shift the thing. No, we're not talking about like a blow up the business and start afresh. We're talking about looking at it now as it is today, and what you want for today, and how can we make it work. So that's really the first step that I do. And then there are other things that we focus on, but you'd be surprised how many times it's a business model issue. Like they had a business model that worked when they first started, or maybe they thought it worked but didn't really work, or maybe it's a product market fit issue. So it's not just about, oh, we don't have any money coming in and now our cash flow is negative, so we need more sales. It might be, or it might be that the business model that you're currently operating under can't do what it is you're trying to get it to do, and we need to shift that and make some changes. You may think you're in one business when really the truth you're in another.
Yeah.
So those types of conversations are really difficult for people to have, because I think we're stuck on these sorts of like, this is my baby, this is my baby.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. My late husband was like that with our businesses, and we were highly successful. We had, we catered to a lot of blue chip clients, like Coca-Cola, FedEx, UPS, but there was so much chaos within our business, and I learned a lot. I'll just say that. I'm no longer in that. That's like my previous life. So, but it's just interesting. I can relate to a lot of things you're saying. And my husband was a very chaotic my late husband was a very chaotic person. And so I think a lot of that came through in the business, and which made it very hard to manage a lot of times. But where can people find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Well, my website is trafalgarstrategies.co. And, you can come there, see what we're doing, see what we're up to. Obviously, I'd love to connect with humans, so in a real human way. So find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and just say, "Hey, I heard you," and I love that because I just think that humanity, I think we kind of rock.
Yes.
So, and I love the human connection. If you find that you are finding chaos in your business and you just can't figure out like what it really is, you've done the thing, you did the whole sales thing, you did the whole thing, and it's still not working, and you still feel like you can't walk away. I have a PDF on my website called I actually have a link to a page where it's easy for you to find it. It's nobusinesschaos.com. It's nobusinesschaos.com, meaning business, like chaos is like the enemy of business.
Yeah.
So we don't want that. So you can go there, you download it, it's free. I have a real the name of the book is the eight true culprits causing chaos in your business. It outlines some of the 8 things that I have found that are the real culprits, not the symptoms of it, and gives you some ideas and ways that you can begin to address them. And so if you find right now you're like, okay, you're stepping on my toes, I'm having some chaos going on, go there, check it out. It might be really helpful for you. A lot of folks, it's just me downloading everything that I know to be true about small and medium-sized businesses and making them run smoothly.
Excellent. You guys, I'm going to put all those links in the show notes, her website address, her LinkedIn link, and her No Business Cast where you can get that PDF. So, Kerry Ann, this is an awesome conversation. I feel like we just keep going for hours, but then we would lose the
I would talk with you forever, girl.
I know, like, geez, it's been flowing so easily. And we'll just have to have you back for a follow-up, just check in with you later down the road. But I always like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
Small and medium-sized business owners, like, sometimes feel a bit like, this is just my thing, I'm just running this thing. But 2/3 of people that are hired in the US and are working for a small and medium-sized company. 90% of businesses in the US are small and medium-sized. In the rest of the world, it's 99 in Europe and in Africa and in Asia. I need for us as owners of small and medium-sized businesses to like hold the head up a bit, put your shoulders back, and recognize that the role that you play as a founder of a small and medium-sized business is very vital to our economies, not just our local economies. Yes, the tax base, yes, the infrastructure of our towns and cities, but for our nation and our world. And if we're looking at economic growth holistically, it comes from new and small and medium-sized businesses because we have the innovation, we have the ability to grow. So if you're thinking about, I don't feel like doing this one thing today, or I'm going to work in my business more than I'm going to work on it today, take a step back and look and realize the importance that your business has in the people that you hire, the people that work for you, your customers, your communities, and recognize that what you do today makes a difference in how your community expands, our country expands, in the world. So I think it's really important to own that.
I love it. Great words of advice. I am obviously pro-entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I only worked for corporate right after my husband passed, just to get my life, put my life back together, because I'd lost almost everything. And, I just think that us entrepreneurs, we need to always be looking at ways to improve how we run our businesses and how to scale, like you said. And there are so many tools and people like yourself out there to help small, medium-sized businesses get to that next step. Kerry Ann, this has been a great conversation. I've just enjoyed this so much. I look forward to having you back on the show and updating the audience and just reminding them who you are, and really appreciate everything that you've done in your life and all of the things that you've accomplished.
Thank you, Deanna. It has been awesome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.